Hello, and today in our extended version of 31 Days of Self-Care, I wanted to add some interviews with people who would give us information and inspiration. And I can't think of any story more inspiring than that of Dortha Hise. Now, let me explain how we met. Dortha was my technical assistant when I did my first series, Vital, Vivacious, and Visible After 50. And she also helped me resurrect it when my server lost the whole thing, which was a nightmare we won't go into. But she was always so kind and so generous. But that's the front story. The backstory is that when we first started work, what was it, 10 years ago, 9 years ago, something like that?
Yeah, 10, yeah, I had to have been at least 10.
Yeah. Um, I was starting to lose my hearing, and Dortha had completely lost her voice. So I think we were on Skype at that time. We didn't even
Yeah,
do Zoom, right?
yeah, I don't think Zoom
And
was
so,
around yet.
right. And so we did a lot of typing and it worked out fine.
Mhm.
But then she regained her voice. And this
Mm.
is an amazing story. So Dortha, I'm going to talk to you because she's written a book about this. And the book is called Rising Above the Ashes by Dortha Hise, Hise. It's on Amazon. I'll link it here. Dortha, explain to us this whole story
Yeah.
and what you did to come out of this, and what is the technical name of how of that vocal loss that you had?
Yeah. So first, thank you for having me and inviting me to be here. I'm really grateful and honored to be sharing my story. Um, so the condition is called abductor spasmodic dysphonia, and it's like a huge mouthful. And essentially, what it means is that one of my vocal cords is normally when you speak, they vibrate like this, and one of mine is pulled out like this all the time. So you can still hear it a little bit, and I have learned to better manipulate my background sounds and that sort of thing. So I can get a lot of really quiet background noise so that I don't have competing sounds. But if we were in a room like a party, you and I in particular would have a real challenge communicating. But
Yes.
in general, I have a pretty difficult time speaking in being heard, rather not speaking, but being heard in rooms with a lot of noise or outdoors if it's really loud.
Mm.
So, how this all came to be was it started, let's see, gosh, my diagnosis came in 2013. And this was about 6 months into a 2 year loss and grief period that started the summer of 2012 when I unexpectedly lost my mother. I got a phone call from a stranger who actually left a voicemail to tell me that
Oh,
my mom had died. And I was at the movies with my husband and thought, oh my God, this is like some kind of joke. I hung up the message. I was like, what the hell? So I hung up and my husband's like, what is that? And I said, he said that my mom died. And he looked at me and he was like, wait, what? And so he's like, will you please play the message again? So I put it on speakerphone and we listened. And, sure enough, yes, that is what he said. So he left his number for me to call him back. I did. And there was this whole exchange. And essentially, what it was with it, they had to leave information with somebody so that the sheriffs there could, proceed with their things. So I guess they had called me and also my half sister who lived nearby and, was trying to just get a hold of one of us. So the impetus for the book came right after my mom passed away because we had a really challenging relationship and I knew that I was going to I felt like in my soul that I knew it was going to be a difficult time to grieve,
that's it.
not just because it was my mom and it's the only mom you get, but for a myriad of reasons around our relationship. So I just immediately went out and picked up a really beautiful journal that spoke to me, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to journal and see what happens. Over the course of that journaling and that 2 year period that I mentioned, I ended up losing another 27 people. And so it was this compounding grief and heartache and just I don't know how to better describe it to you than just like feeling like my soul was being sucked out and
Oh,
like
yeah.
every time the phone would ring, I didn't want to answer it because I was like, Jesus, somebody else has died. I don't even want to know. And it got to the point where I was so I guess the word probably was terrified. I would wake up in the middle of the night and touch my husband to make sure that he was still breathing.
Mhm, mhm.
it got to that point where I was like, okay, like what else? What else? And, I kept remembering having this conversation with God saying, I know you think I'm strong and I appreciate that you keep this going or whatever it is, but I don't know how much more of this I can take, because it just felt like I was waiting to break, really is what it was. And I just kept journaling, and I remember the closing, if you will, of the last person who died in that 2-year period was my great aunt, who her mom was my great grandmother. She was 103 when she died. She was the matriarch of our family, and our moms died 3 months apart. And so she and I had already been really, really close.
Mm.
And we got even closer after our moms died, and we just bonded and we texted all the time. And she was just an amazing person and a presence in my life. And she was the last person to pass away. And now, if she were here, she would tell you like she was living on borrowed time. She had had a lung cancer diagnosis and was like 17 years on this side of it. And she was an amazing human being to like just beat all the odds. And she lived every day that way. And so I think that my proximity to all of these deaths and the relationship depth, deepening and intimacy, and not in like a sexual way, but just that deepening of relationship and ties to people, really was one of the beautiful gifts that came out of this whole experience. And let's see, she died in May of 2014, and that winter I published my book. And so it was kind of I don't know, it was like just everything sort of flowed together. And you know how I know people say, if you want to make God laugh, make plans or something like that. Um, and it wasn't anything like that, but it was like also at the same time, if you have a plan or a calling, it keeps calling you. And
Yes.
so I just kept persevering and trusting the process and knowing that at some point people were going to stop dying, and some semblance of normalcy would come back. And it did, but it took a really long time. And I will tell you that one of the things on this side of the experience that I definitely am appreciative of is that through the pandemic, I have been a source of comfort, a place for people to feel safe to talk about, losing their loved ones. And that's been a real gift, because I know talking about death and grief is really challenging for a lot of people, because we're just told to sort of brush it under the carpet. And
Especially in this culture.
yes, yes. And I have just always wanted people to not brush it under the rug, along with mental health, the same kind of thing. I feel like some people really struggle after a death or a loss, and especially if it's like of a spouse or of a child or something like that, that there's a certain mental health things that also happen. And I feel like those things just aren't talked about, and I really do my best to encourage people to talk about them, and to get the support that they need. So how I got through my journey.
I want to mention something about
Yeah,
that,
go ahead.
because because there the, the 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 beauty of this, there's always something beautiful in that. The phrase you used, being heard. I think that a lot of times when people are grieving, they, I mean, in your case, it was like you literally could not be heard. It's like there's a silent scream that wants to be done.
Yeah.
And so I think the fact that you are counseling people and helping people through this
Mhm.
is remarkable and wonderful. And the fact that that God led you to your calling, and that if we listen, our calling comes to us. It doesn't have to be a huge calling. It can
Yeah.
be anything.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I mentioned in this 31 days is the power of nature to heal. And
Yeah.
that's the other reason why I invited you here. So yes, please talk
Yeah.
to us a little bit about this.
Yeah. So As I mentioned, I had this really challenging relationship with my mom, and I had always been a believer of the healing power of nature. And I remember my grandma showing me pictures of me being out in her backyard on her property feeding wild horses, and she was terrified I was going to get trampled. And meanwhile, here's little 10-year-old me, like just running right up and feeding them because I didn't know any better. I was just like, oh, there's this majestic, beautiful animal, and they're calling to me, so I'm going to go run to them. And that has always been part of me and who I am. And I think, as you kind of pick a path and a career and whatever school and all the things, you can kind of get away from some of those things.
That's right.
Um, we got invited on a backpacking trip. I think it was 2015 or 2016. So shortly after my book and shortly after this whole grieving period. And my husband sent me this email and said, hey, babe, do you want to go? And I sat with it and I was like, I've always kind of wanted to do that. It sounds pretty fun. And so I wrote back and was like, yeah, okay, sure, let's do it. So we committed, and it was a 3-day, 44-mile trip.
Wow.
And on that trip, I remember setting an intention when I was getting ready and packing and getting ready to leave, that I wanted to receive whatever I was meant to receive. It wasn't anything specific, and it wasn't anything like regarding my mom, regarding this or that. It was just very general. And I can't exactly articulate it, but I remember coming home. The trip was amazing, by the way, and we've done hundreds of miles since then. But I remember coming home and sitting at this exact table I'm at right now and just feeling this overwhelming sense of peace
Hmm.
about my relationship with my mom. And I was able to, I kind of liken it to, putting a puzzle together and getting those pieces to that fit properly and like finding that one that was missing, and it goes into that spot and you get the whole picture. I felt like that was what happened with my relationship with my mom. I always kind of had some voids, and I felt like getting this trip in was really a way to reconnect with myself, reconnect with my relationship with God, with my husband, and with this new person that became a very dear friend of ours. Um, all on this 3-day thing, and it's like, how did that happen? And it was just really because I opened my heart and was willing and open to the experience. But there are times on the trail you spend a lot of times by yourself, a lot of time by yourself,
Hmm.
and so you're in your head. And like, you have to be careful there, and you also have to be willing to let what come be show up. And so, I started carrying a journal with me on the trail because things pop into my head and I don't want to forget them. I actually remember one trip I forgot my journal, and I had to remember a poem that took me. I did recited it for 3 days on this trip so that I would remember it when I got home. And I'm not normally that kind of an artistic person, or I don't consider myself that kind of an artistic person. So it was really interesting, a lot of the things that have shown up as a result of just being open and willing to receive whatever gifts I am meant to receive. So,
And,
yeah.
it's fascinating to me because I think when you're put in a position where you have to be extremely self-sufficient, then and aware, and especially if you feel like you've lost the support that you never had.
Yeah.
And, obviously, it's like on this plane of life, at least you didn't get to complete that with your mother.
Yeah.
But when I think when a person is put, I know it's true for me too, in a position where you have to be self-sufficient and you're facing fear and it's more life and death, you
Yeah, literally.
know, then you find that there is a different kind of support that comes,
Mhm,
and it's inside you and it's outside you. But
mhm.
especially when you're in nature, it's so raw.
Yes.
And that's I think that's what, yeah, if I'm not being presumptuous, I think that's a large part of what you experienced, that there was this new layer of support for you that
Mhm.
was stronger because it was yours, that you owned.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I can also tell you it doesn't just happen when we're on backpacking trips. We've done, hike to the top of a peak somewhere, and I get overwhelmed and I cry. I mean, it's
Mm.
just it's a catharsis and it's an ongoing healing of getting back, I would say getting back to my true self, right?
Yes.
Because, all the years of things that I've said to myself or I've let others say to me, and it's, not in the kindest of ways. Um, and it's like, I think I don't know. I mean, I'm a spiritual person, so I've said, God, but like I feel like God is saying to me, like, look, you're my child, and like, look how I look at you, and like, look how I see you, right? And if we all kind of did that more often, and whatever your believer, creator, divine, whatever it is, I feel like we would have more grace with ourselves. And I really feel like it's a challenge because there's so many external forces, like you were saying, that we kind of tend to turn away from that thing that's in ourselves.
That's
And I feel like that's the real bummer.
yes, that's very true. I think you need to write a follow-on book.
I'm working on it, but I'm trying to determine the topic. I actually just recently was,
Yeah,
someone suggested I should write the happy married couples hiker guide or something like that.
right, right. And so that one backpacking trip, that was the beginning of your exploration. And I've
Yeah.
noticed from being on your email list
Yeah.
that you have continued doing
Mhm.
a lot of these physical things. Because I think a lot of
Yeah.
times when we get into our head too much, um, I think that's when we most need to have some real exertion that we do.
Yeah.
And I know I was in Iowa one winter when it was like, 0 degrees. And I noticed um, there's not a lot of neuroticism there because it's like, you got to get warm, you got to eat, you got to get out and get home.
Everything takes work.
Right. And so I think that, you're continuing with your with exercise and hiking and being in nature.
Yeah.
That's something that you have continued, right? That's part of
Oh, yeah.
that.
Yeah. Actually, after we did this first trip, my husband and I came back home and we're like, okay, we have a new goal. We want to hike the Pacific Crest Trail along the whole distance of the Sierras, not the whole trail from Mexico to Canada, but the section along the Sierra Nevada mountains, which is really close to us. And I'm excited to report we actually have about 150 miles left, and I think it's
Ooh,
somewhere like 500 or 600 miles is the total. So it takes a long time and a lot of planning and preparation, which is one of the things that my little nerdy side, my tech side that I've
yeah,
helped
right.
you with. That's the part that I really enjoy. Like I get to nerd out on maps and planning and mileage and where are the campsites and where's the water. It's one, yeah, I love
That's
it.
wonderful. Now, I know there's another piece to this that I always find very interesting, and that is that you also nourished yourself in other ways, because I know you really love, as I do, essential oils.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about that and which ones were beneficial for you.
Gosh, yeah. I early in my treatment when I was seeing a voice an ENT specialist and a voice therapist and doing all of my treatments, I have always been a whole person uh, care person. So I have always looked for alternative ways to treat myself and not be just ingesting meds and
Right.
popping the pill for the next thing. So I tried acupuncture. I did EFT. I received Reiki. Like I did all sorts of things, and I became very attracted to essential oils because they were something I had control over, and I didn't have to have a master's degree to learn how to use them.
Yes.
So I got some books and I just started reading up on this oil is good for this and this is nice for that. So I just started playing with them. I would lavender is one of my go-tos. It's one of my favorites. Lemon, frankincense has been a really good one. Helichrysum, another one. Um, Copaiba. Just really kind of exploring like what helps with inflammation, what helps with trauma, because some of my own
Right.
research, I learned that people that develop this condition or have this condition bestowed upon them, it's neurological in origin, which is basically to say they don't exactly know what causes it. And what I was finding is that a lot of people had endured significant trauma, and that 2 year
Oh,
period of grief that I went through would be what I would say was my significant trauma. Some people like saw their significant other or their family like murdered, for example. So that trauma really kind of just localized in their vocal cords. So um, I was grateful that essential oils came into my life because they're still very much a part of my life, and I'm grateful now that my husband is like, "Hey, honey, do you have an oil for this?"
Yeah.
Which is really great. So,
Yeah, I love those too. There's another one you mentioned that I was going to suggest to a friend called thieves oil.
oh yeah,
And
yeah.
what does that do?
Do you know the story behind thieves oil?
No.
So, in the bubonic plague, legend has it that, there were grave robbers, and when people were buried, they would have their jewels and their whatevers on them. And these grave robbers would layer on all of these herbs and scents, so like cinnamon and clove and everything that's in thieves, and they would go grave rob, and they would not get the plague. And so, yeah, that's why it's called thieves, and it's really great for boosting immunity. And so like you can put it on the soles of your feet. Some people ingest it or put it into a capsule and ingest it that way. It's one of my favorite wintertime like go-tos. I put it in tea, or like my magnesium tea that I do at night. I like to put it in there
Right.
too.
Yeah, I think, and especially in, especially in the winter, and everybody's been so crazy concerned about viruses and COVID.
Yeah,
Whatever we can do to boost our immune system is great.
and whatever
And I
we can do
think
naturally,
exercising and these sort of preventive
for
things are
sure.
very helpful. So
Yeah.
what do you see? Where is this thread leading you? Do you have any idea what's coming up in the future for you?
Oh, I might not have told you this. So this is new for you. Yeah, so I've created 3 card decks that were inspired by, you mentioned my daily workouts. So they feature a daily mantra from one of my workouts. And then I have photos that we've used, taken, I'm sorry, on various backpacking or hiking trips from the Northern California area. And there's a call to action on each one. I wanted these cards to be something that people could um, get in action about, and also, kind of feel good about themselves. So maybe they have it sitting on their desk, but I really wanted them to do something with it, like get out and actually take action. So those are the 3 pillar stones of the next piece, which is what I'm working on now, which is what I'm calling a choose your own adventure healing portal.
Yeah.
And that is going to be basically helping people to learn how to tap into the healing power of nature for themselves, to be able to let go of, nagging or recurring emotions that keep showing up and plaguing them, or just otherwise not letting them move forward. So getting unstuck from that. There'll be dancing,
This
nature.
dancing definitely. But this gives me goosebumps. I'm so thrilled about that. And
Thank
I
you.
will I will link all this in the article and on this video.
Awesome.
Dortha Hise, you were an inspiration.
Aw,
It's not only a pleasure to know you, it's a privilege to know you.
thank you so much, Andrea. I
And
appreciate it.
I want to thank you so much for being a part of this 31 days of self-care. And I hope it becomes 365 days
I
of
think it should.
self-care for the people that watch. Okay, take good care.
Thank you.